Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to DNA for Native American Genealogy. It's my brand new book. I'm Roberta Estes, and I'd like to talk to you today about why it's important to be able to work with your DNA and find your Native ancestors. If you're like me, you have questions, so many questions. I had an oral history in my family of a Native American ancestor. Maybe you do too. Or maybe you have DNA results that might suggest Native ancestors. How about an ethnicity test that does, or maybe doesn't, suggest Native heritage? Maybe you expected it and didn't find it. Have you found conflicting information? How about what tribe? What tribe was your ancestor a member of? How do you discover more? And how can you uncover Native American ancestors? How do you know who they were? Which tools are available for you, and how can you use them? Well, you are not alone. There's lots of people just like you out there. Native heritage and the search for our ancestors is very popular. At my blog, DNA Explained, the most frequently read articles have to do with Native American ancestry. The top all-time article since 2012 every year consistently is proving Native American ancestry using DNA. That article is followed by calculating ethnicity percentages and how much Indian do I have in me. Everyone wants to know what to expect. The most popular search terms reflect the same trend. Everybody's interested in this topic. So I wrote the book, DNA for Native American Genealogy, in order to put all the information in one place. And as a bonus, at the end, I've included a roadmap for you to be able to map out your research. The goal is to use all the resources that we have available. We need to start with understanding Native culture and history. What were the tribes like that were in the area where our ancestors lived? There really weren't things like Indian princesses. So if that's in your family, maybe there was something, but it wasn't an Indian princess. We need to look at geography and treaties. If your family was in Maine and your oral history says that they were Cherokee, that's probably not accurate. It doesn't mean they weren't Native and they weren't in Maine, but they probably weren't Cherokee because the Cherokee didn't live there. What happened to whom and when? In other words, what was going on in the area when your ancestor lived with the Native people that lived there? We need to use traditional genealogical records. For example, if there was a treaty and there was land involved, perhaps your ancestor is mentioned in land records. Perhaps they were on rolls that the tribes took. So you need to look at traditional genealogical records and see what you can find that way. You also need to test with reputable DNA companies and utilize third-party tools like DNA Painter and others. And you'll also want to involve your relatives. Not only might they have information that you don't, they have DNA that you don't. So we'll use everything at our disposal. My other blog, the Native Heritage Project, documents early Native records, so take a look there too. The DNA tests are found at 4 major vendors. Family Tree DNA has Y-DNA, mitochondrial, autosomal, haplogroups, parental side bucketing without your parents, so your maternal or paternal side, ethnicity including chromosome painting. Their database is the oldest and spans 21 years, so a lot of the people that tested early aren't with us anymore. So it's a bonus to find information there. My heritage includes ethnicity, genetic communities, and triangulation. And My Heritage, 23andMe, and Ancestry only offer autosomal DNA, so they don't include the Y in mitochondrial. 23andMe offers ethnicity, triangulation, ethnicity chromosome painting, and estimated haplogroups for Y and mitochondrial DNA, although not nearly as much as if you tested those two types of DNA at Family Tree DNA. And Ancestry has the largest autosomal database and includes ethnicity and DNA communities. But there's no magic single bullet tool that works for everyone all the time. In fact, most of us have to use all of them. The DNA tests at Family Tree DNA include Y-DNA for men only because it tests the Y chromosome, and it it looks to see if the Y chromosome that a man carries is Native American. And they can tell this because Native Americans have specific portions of haplogroups C and Q, and probably O. Yeah, that's in red. You know why that's in red? Because that's a discovery that I made and documented when I was writing the book. You can find out more about that there. Mitochondrial DNA is matrilineal, so your mother's line, and Native Americans have parts of haplogroup A, B, C, D, X, and probably F. And yes, F is also a recent discovery. You can join projects at Family Tree DNA by topic, like the American Indian Project, or Acadians, or Cherokees, or any wide range of topics, or by haplogroup, like the haplogroups above. For autosomal DNA, there's matching, family side bucketing, even without your parents, if you can identify other people from that side of your family tree, and triangulation. Under ethnicity, they show you your ethnicity, but also your population-based chromosome painting, which identifies and paints your native segments. And here's an example of one of mine, my pink Native American segment from the Americas, which tells me where it is, and then I can find other people that match me on that same segment, which will help me to identify that Native American ancestor that gave me that segment. So why does family matter? If you test yourself, isn't that enough? No, it's really not, because family members carry different DNA than you do. For different Y and mitochondrial lineages, different people who descend from, let's say, your paternal great-grandmother, your paternal great-grandfather, they will have different Y or mitochondrial DNA than you do. In fact, your father has your paternal grandmother's mitochondrial DNA, but you and your siblings have your mother's, because only women give it to their offspring and only daughters pass it on. So different people will carry different Y and mitochondrial as well as autosomal. So you want to test everyone upstream that you can. And your siblings, if both parents aren't available, because your siblings will have different DNA as well. And that DNA of your family members may hold clues that your own DNA does not. So haplogroups, tribes, and locations, that's important, because once you find someone with a Native American haplogroup, which is what I did, my Native American ancestor was not the person it was rumored to be. It was an entirely different person. So when I found out who it was by finding that that person carried a Native American haplogroup, I could then look for other people and look for segments associated with that ancestor and really start digging in to find out who that ancestor was and where they lived. So haplogroups and tribes and locations, I've compiled all this information for you in the book. And this is based on published academic papers, on public project participants at Family Tree DNA who've joined different projects that are available publicly on the web, and are based on the genographic project participants who opted in for research and completed known tribal or language information. And this includes all of the Americas, not just the United States and Canada and Mexico, all of the Americas. So here's one example. For haplogroup X2A1, there is ancient DNA, and yes, I also included ancient DNA, at the Lucier site in southwest Ontario. Modern locations where X2A1 is found include Canada, Manitoba, Manitoulin Island, Montana, New York, Oklahoma, Virginia, and Wisconsin. Of course, that may be other places too, but those are the locations I was able to isolate through the records I had available. It's found in the Chippewa and Ojibwe tribe. Now, it's probably also found in other tribes if you look at where the DNA, but I don't have anybody who was able to confirm that their ancestor were members of other tribes. And there's an interesting note. Kennewick man was X2A, not X2A1, so a parent haplogroup, and he, of course, was found on the West Coast. This information isn't available anyplace else. It's scattered in many places, but I've brought it all together in one place in the book. I also included ancient DNA and contemporary DNA maps separately. I provided a haplotree for each major haplogroup, and you can see here that this is the ancient DNA map for haplogroup X and subclades. So the subclades of haplogroup X that we have found in ancient DNA in the Americas We have one X2A, which is Kennewick Man, which you can see there in Washington, and one which is X2A1, which is the Luthier site. Kennewick Man is about 8,500 years old, and the remains from the Luthier site are between 12 and 1300 CE, which is current era, so between the year 12 and 1300. So this is very interesting because you can look at, this is the ancient DNA map, but in the book there's also a contemporary DNA map for each haplogroup, and you can look and see where other people with this DNA are found, in addition to looking at which tribes they're found in. So we have a lot of information packed into the book. You'll want to utilize applicable tools as well. DNA Painter paints chromosomes from multiple vendors, including ethnicity. It's a standalone tool that we use in genetic genealogy quite a bit. And what you can do there is once you find your native segments and identify them, then you can see who else you match that matches you on those segments. And if you're using the paternal and maternal side matching at Family Tree DNA, you'll be able to tell which side that native segment is from, your mother or your father, and who matches you on that side. Genetic Affairs is also really useful because it clusters your matches, and once you've identified the people that match you on that segment, then you can use those tools to see who else matches you on those segments. And they also offer some tools at GEDmatch as well. WikiTree, Family Search, and the testing vendors are great to use to find testers who may match you autosomally, but may have a different Y or mitochondrial haplogroup, or would be candidates to test that based on how they descend from your common ancestor. There are free download and upload autosomal tools, so you can download your test from one of those 4 vendors and upload it for free at either Family Tree DNA or MyHeritage. 23andMe and Ancestry do not accept uploads. The uploads are free at those 2 vendors, and so is matching, but you can unlock the advanced tools at MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA for $29 and $19 respectively. That's a great value. It's a lot cheaper than testing. You can also match your native segments. You can see by downloading the raw data file, your match file, who you match on the segment that's Native American, so you can see how that works. And you can use DNA tree matching tools such as theories of family relativity at MyHeritage and through-lines at Ancestry as well. At the end of the book, you can create your roadmap. I give you a checkbox, a list, and it shows you which tools, and you can see which ones are appropriate for you. So you can do this with autosomal and Y-DNA, downloading, mining for test candidates, ethnicity results, figure out who would help you in your search. And you can trace the DNA segments to your ancestors. So create your testing and research plan. And you can purchase the book from genealogical.com, and if you're outside the US, so Canada or elsewhere, you can purchase the book from amazon.com. It's $34.95. I hope you enjoy it and use it and find that native ancestor. Thank you so much.